Well, US Secretary of State Anthony Blinken has called for humanitarian aid to be delivered to Gaza and for all Israeli hostages to be released. He was speaking at the United Nations, where the Security Council is meeting to discuss the ongoing conflict in the Middle East. The UN's Secretary General, António Guterres, also addressed the chamber.
It is important to also recognize the attacks by Hamas did not happen in a vacuum. The Palestinian people have been subjected to 56 years of suffocating occupation. They have seen their land steadily devoured by settlements and plagued by violence, their economy stifled, their people displaced, and their homes demolished. Their hopes for a political solution to their plight have been vanishing. But the grievances of the Palestinian people cannot justify the appalling attacks by Hamas, and those appalling attacks cannot justify the collective punishment of the Palestinian people.
Let's hear now from some of the foreign ministers from Arab nations who held a press conference at the United Nations.
So let's just step back. Let's not let rage determine the future of millions of people in our region. Let's allow common sense and reason to come back, and let's all together, the whole world in this United Nations, come and say it is time we solve this challenge, this conflict once and for all. And the only way is peace that will fulfill the rights of all and would allow all of us to start working together to create a better future for all our people.
A ceasefire is a humanitarian imperative. We are facing a desperate situation in Gaza right now. We are facing an impending humanitarian catastrophe. Every hour we speak, more civilians in Gaza are dying, more people are getting injured. The situation is getting worse. A ceasefire is an absolute necessity immediately. That will allow us to address all of the other issues.
Let's cross to the UN now. Kristen Saloomey standing by for us there in New York. And Kristen, so do you get any sense from today's speeches that the Security Council is any closer to taking action?
Well, we know that the United States is working on a resolution. They have been in recent days negotiating furiously behind the scenes with other members of the Security Council, a resolution that would give access to Gaza, what it refers to as humanitarian pauses, in order for aid to get into the region. A resolution that strongly condemned Hamas and defended Israel's right to defend itself under international law, but also called for, respect for Palestinian civilians and deplored the loss of civilians on both sides, essentially. So this has been in the works. But we heard during the meeting today from Russia that they have some issues with this. Russia said that it is concerned that by failing to call for a ceasefire, the resolution would give cover to an Israeli ground invasion by not demanding an immediate ceasefire. So the question now is, where do the other council members stand on this? And Russia, by the way, said that it would submit its own draft resolution to be voted on after the United States vote. The United States initially called for a vote this morning and then withdrew that call, suggesting that maybe they wanted more time to negotiate with people on the council. So where do the other people stand? If U.S. drafts and if the U.S. will veto Russia and Russia will veto the U.S., where do the other council members stand? And that's where we got some sense in the council. France, for example, was calling for the need for humanitarian pauses that could lead to a ceasefire. A bit ambiguous. But China and many non-permanent members of the council were pretty clear in calling for an immediate ceasefire. Notably, the United Arab Emirates, the Arab member of the council, was very strong in calling for an immediate ceasefire. So there seems to be some back and forth and disagreement over the terms of a resolution yet, and no known vote scheduled at this time.
Kristen, many things said by many people, including, of course, the Secretary General, António Guterres. What was it that he said that prompted the Israeli Foreign Minister to cancel his meeting with Guterres?
Yeah, well, you heard a little bit of what he said just a few minutes ago. After condemning Hamas's attack on Israel and calling for the unconditional release of the people being held by Hamas, he went on to say that the attack did not happen in a vacuum and that Israel has subjected the Palestinian people to 56 years of suffocating occupation. This prompted the foreign minister to cancel his meeting with the Secretary General. He and the UN ambassador from Israel have called for the Secretary General to step down from his position. They were very clear about this. We asked for the Secretary General's response. His spokesperson said only that the Secretary General would be meeting in the coming hours with the families of those people who are in Hamas custody, and they would be brought to him by an Israeli representative.
All right, Kristen, thanks for that update there from the UN. That's Kristen Saloomey in New York. Let's now bring this all together with Marwan Bishara, Al Jazeera's senior political analyst, joining us now from London. So, Marwan, what did you make of the comings and goings at the UN today?
Well, there are two things that struck me, Nick. One is the Secretary General's speech. I thought, for a change, he was balanced, sober, and rather put everything in context. Since the Secretary General Guterres is supposed to represent the sort of the soul and the spirit of what is the United Nations and what is international law, I thought he hit all the right notes in terms of speaking about the historical injustice to the Palestinians, the meager attempts at helping them today, the inability of the international community to act, and as well as condemning the killing of civilians, both Israelis and Palestinians, while speaking about why the international community cannot just keep watching as Palestinians die in their thousands. I thought that was, at last, the Secretary General speaks in the spirit of what is international law, what is international community.
But has it shifted the dial in terms of what might be about to happen? And then come on to your second point.
Yeah, the second point is just quickly that it seems like we are in the theater of the absurd, right? Everyone talks about everything and everyone talks past everyone and everyone contradicts every other one. And even those who, like the foreign ministers in the Arab countries, they spoke more like political analysts or journalists rather than politicians who have leverage and who are able to put their weight and make an ultimatum to the likes of the United States and other members of the UN Security Council. So all in all, I think what happened in the United Nations today did not affect the situation in Gaza. People continue to die in their hundreds a day in Gaza, regardless, apparently, of what happens at the United Nations.
Right. Interesting. Lots of things happening today. We've had various comments from the White House, including saying that the US has taken no position on the legality of Israel's reoccupation of Gaza, should that happen. What do you make of that?
I tell you, I actually salute Secretary Blinken for his capacity for spin. I mean, I've never seen a speech with so much spin in it. Really speaking in wonderful tone about human rights, about carrots to the Palestinians, while basically, doubling down behind Israel's sticks. Really, in the end of the day, thinking like as if the Palestinians are donkeys that could be treated with carrots and sticks, give them some money, commit some more dollars, but at the same time, dispatch few more American bombs to kill more civilians in Gaza. Speaking from really out of both sides of his mouth in such double standard, it was I don't know what's the word. It was frustrating listening to the spin with such a laid back tone, such a wonderful, soft approach. But in the end of the day, as I said, they speak, but people die in Gaza.
Away from the American East Coast, President Macron of France has been meeting with President Abbas in Ramallah. How's that going to shape things? How important is that?
I tell you, this is another shock and awe today, listening to the French president, it's as if Islamophobia has drove some of the Western leaders crazy. We're back to the logic of the 2003 or post-2001, 9/11, and France that suffers from a lot of attacks on its civilians by various terrorists and so on and so forth, can't seem to distinguish between what's happening in Palestine and ISIL and Al-Qaeda. So for him to speak about the need to expand the coalition to fight ISIL into fighting Hamas is just pure craziness.
All right, Marwan, so much to chew on, and we'll do that again a little bit later for the time being. Thanks a lot, Marwan Bishara there in London. So we were just speaking about the statements that have been coming out tonight of the United States. Earlier, the National Security Council spokesman, John Kirby, said a ceasefire in Gaza would only benefit Hamas. Let's bring in our White House correspondent, Kimberly Halkett in Washington, D.C. So, Kimberly, tell us more about what we heard from John Kirby and the White House tonight and what it all means.
Yeah, well, what the spokesperson was saying there is that despite the worldwide protests and the pressure that this White House and Israel is under to enact a ceasefire, that is exactly the opposite of what this White House and Israel is favoring right now. Instead, what they're saying is that they might be considering humanitarian pauses, but this is, in terms of a ceasefire, something that they believe would only benefit Hamas. And as for the aid that might be allowed to go in terms of a humanitarian pause, the U.S. President Joe Biden saying that he feels aid, as it stands right now, is not getting in fast enough. And John Kirby, the spokesperson, saying as of today, Tuesday, no trucks have been able to get into Gaza to bring food, water, medicine. So another day where civilians once again are going without those critical supplies that they need. Now, as we know, Palestinians are going without those critical supplies. John Kirby, the spokesperson, told us that the opposite is happening on the Israeli side. In fact, when it comes to evacuations, he said that Israelis and Israeli Americans, in fact, are not even taking advantage of the charter flights in terms of evacuations. He said those are continuing even as Palestinians are trapped. And in fact, some of those flights, he said, are half empty. So it really is a stark contrast. What we also know is that as we are reporting that the Palestinians in Gaza are in dire situations and without the very basics, sometimes to sustain life, the White House is making no apologies for that situation, saying that there is efforts underway to mitigate what they call collateral damage. But the bottom line is John Kirby saying this is war. So it was some pretty frank talk, quite frankly, Nick. But the bottom line is that this White House is saying that the responsibility for all of this is not Israel, it is Hamas. And they are saying that Hamas is to blame, not only for what is happening now, but that this originated in the eyes of the White House on October 7th with that attack.
Yep. All right. Kimberly, thanks for that. Kimberly Halkett there, Washington, D.C. at the White House. Thank you.